Chapter 1. No Global Future. Religious Myths. Progress, Global Capitalism, Global Revolution, and Global Collapse. The idea of progress was central to the modern Western paradigm, and the presumption that the entire world was moving ever onwards towards a better future was dominant. The idea of the inevitability or possibility of a global libertarian future originates from that belief. In many ways, anarchism was and is the libertarian extreme of the European Enlightenment, against God and the state. In some countries such as the turn of the century Spain, it was the Enlightenment, its militantly pro-science anti-clericism being as much of an attraction as its anti-capitalism. Yet the rubbish bin of history is not so easily discarded, and progressive revolutionary movements have often been, in essence, form an aim, the continuation of religion by other means. As an example, the belief that universal peace and beauty would be reached through apocalyptic tumults of blood and fire, revolution, the millennium, the collapse, indicates firmly that as an Enlightenment ideology, anarchism has been heavily burdened by its Euro-Christian origins. John Gray was talking about Marxism when he said it was a radical version of the Enlightenment belief in progress, itself a mutation of Christian hopes, following Judaism and Christianity and seeing history as a moral drama, that's last act is salvation. While some anarchists never fell for such bunkum, many did, and some still do. These days, progress itself is increasingly questioned both by anarchists and across society. I've yet to meet anyone today who still believes in the inevitability of a global anarchist future. However, the idea of a global movement confronting a global present and creating a global future has many apostles. Some of these are even libertarians and look hopefully to the possibility of global anarchist revolution. The illusory triumph of capitalism following the destruction of the Berlin Wall led to the proclamation, more utopian than real, of a new world order, a global capitalist system. The reaction of many to globalization was to posit one from below, and this was only reinforced by the near-simultaneous public emergence of the Zapatistas and the invention of the web. The subsequent international action days, often coinciding with summits, became the focus for the supposedly global anti-capitalist movement of movements. The excitement on the streets enabled many to forestall seeing the specter by looking in the direction of the global movement. But there never was a global movement against capitalism, then or ever, just as capitalism itself was never truly global. There are many, many places where capitalist relations are not the dominant practice, and even more where anti-capitalist, never mind anarchist movements, simply don't exist. Amidst the jolly unreality of this period of global resistance, some could get really carried away. We have no interest in reforming the World Bank or the IMF. We want it abolished as part of an international anarchist revolution. Such statements are understandable if written in the drunk-like exuberance one can sometimes feel on having defeated the police, but they are found more commonly. The self-description of one anarchist federation reads, "As the capitalist system rules the whole world, its destruction must be complete and worldwide." The illusion of a singular world capitalist present is mirrored by the illusion of a singular world anarchist future. I love us, there's so much we can do and be, but there are limits. Anarchists are growing in number. Groups and countercultures are appearing in countries where there are few or no social movement anarchists previously. Yet an honest appraisal of our strengths and prospects, and those of the communities and classes we are a part of, would show clearly that we are not growing the new society in the shell of the old, that someday will liberate the world in a moment of rupture. The earth has a lot of places with a lot of people, a reality that can increasingly easily get lost in the web-encapsulated global activist village. To want to rid the world of capitalist social relations, or further still civilization, is one thing. To be capable of doing so is something else entirely. We are not everywhere. We are rare. Actions, circles of friends, social centers, urban guerrilla cells, magazine editorial groups, eco-warriors, housing co-ops, students, refugees, arsonists, parents, squats, scientists, peasants, strikers, teachers, land-based communes, musicians, tribespeople, street gangs, loving insurgents, and so much else. Anarchists can be absolutely wonderful. We can have beauty and self-possessed power and possibility in buckets. We cannot, however, remake the entire world. There are not enough of us, and never will be. Some may argue that a global libertarian revolution can succeed without being made, or significantly aided, by overt anarchists, so our present numbers and resources are null and void. While it's a given that social crises and revolt are regular occurrences in societies based on class warfare, to put one's faith in the revolutionary impulse of the proletariat is a theory approximate to saying it'll be alright on the night. There is, unfortunately, little evidence from history that the working class, never mind anyone else, is intrinsically predisposed to libertarian or ecological revolution. Thousands of years of authoritarian socialization favor the jackboot. Neither we nor anybody else can create a libertarian and ecological global future society by expanding social movements. Further, there is no reason to think that in the absence of such a vast expansion, a global social transformation congruent with our desires will ever happen. As anarchists, we are not the seed of the future society in the shell of the old, but merely one of many elements from which the future is forming. That's okay. When faced with such scale and complexity, there is a value in non-servile humility, even for insurgents. To give up hope for global anarchist revolution is not to resign oneself to anarchy remaining in eternal protest. Seaweed puts it well. Revolution is not everywhere or nowhere. Any bioregion can be liberated through a succession of events and strategies based on the conditions unique to it, mostly as the grip of civilization in that area weakens through its own volition or through the efforts of its inhabitants. Civilization didn't succeed everywhere at once, and so its undoing might only occur to varying degrees in different places at different times. Even if an area is seemingly fully under the control of authority, there are always places to go, to live in, to love in, and to resist from, and we can extend those spaces. The global situation may seem beyond us, but the local never is. As anarchists, we are neither entirely powerless, nor potentially omnipotent, thankfully. From anti-globalization to climate change. For many of us, when the turn of the century anti-globalization surge lost its momentum, the global thinking and religious optimism went with it. However, in the last few years, an attempt to resurrect the global movement appeared amongst us once again, this time around climate change. The mobilization at the Copenhagen United Nations Climate Change Conference was billed by many as the next Seattle, and some groups have claimed that they are building a global movement to solve the climate crisis. Greenpeace, for instance, says climate change is a global public bad. To solve it requires global collective action. We have no alternative but to build a global grassroots movement, move politicians forward, and force corporations and banks to change direction. I'll take it as a given that you, the reader, understand the naive unreality of such lobby groups, but it's worth looking at those at the less institutionalized end of climate change campaigning. There are three main tendencies, and sometimes folks wander from one to another. Firstly, there are those who have similar beliefs to Greenpeace, i.e., direct action as an awareness-raising, lobbying strategy. Secondly, there are those who use the discourse around climate change to aid mobilization in local campaigns, which, though unlikely to have any effect on climate change, at least have practical and sometimes achievable objectives in mind, i.e., halting the destruction of an ecosystem, or the worsening well-being of a community, or simply increasing self-sufficiency. Thirdly, there are those nostalgic anti-capitalists who envision climate justice as a metamorphosis of the imagined ultra-globalization movement. Notice it's increasingly no longer anti-globalization. An anonymous writer described the last tendency well. When activists try to convince us that it's the last chance to save the Earth, it's because they're trying to build social movements. There's a growing and disturbing trend that has been lingering around radical circles over the last few years, based on the idea that blind positivity can lead to interesting and unexpected successes. Michael Hart and Tony Negri's books have provided some of the theoretical bases for this, and it has been taken up by some who want to unite the masses under the banner of precarity, organize migrants, and mobilize for summits. For many coming from the left-wing tradition, it has been the message of hope that they were wanting here, at a time when their ideologies seemed more moribund than ever. Theoreticians who should understand capitalism well enough to know better write that a global basic income or free movement for all is an achievable goal. They may not believe it themselves, but ostensibly want to inspire others to believe in it, claiming that the moments of excess generated by such utopian dreams will give rise to potent movements for change. Climate change is certainly a suitable testing ground for the politics of manufactured hope, being so alienated from our actual everyday realities. But while the new movement politicians, facilitators not dictators, watch their movements grow, there is still a case for living in the real world. Outside the convention centers, the new stars appear more and more like those from within. Inside and out, the message is that a global future is winnable if only we organize. However, the reality both within ecosystems generally and people's stomachs in particular is that there is no global singular future and no imaginary community, either states or multitudes, or both a la Cochabamba, can stop climate change. Given our obvious inability to remake the entire world the way we might like it to be, some replace the myth of global revolution with a belief in imminent global collapse, these days usually some mix of climate change and peak oil. As we shall see later, both in the next chapters and our future years, global heating will severely challenge civilization in some areas and probably vanquish it in others. Yet in some regions it will likely open up possibilities for the spread of civilization's rule. Some lands may remain relatively temperate, climatically and socially. As for civilization, so for anarchy and anarchists. Severely challenged, sometimes vanquished, possibilities for liberty and wildness opening up, possibilities for liberty and wildness closing. The unevenness of the present will be made more so. There is no global future.